I'm focused on his spirit cause it keeps me from his fire. The Holy Ghost was with me, so my fear I leave behind. My sins were all diminished when he took that breath and died. And if you think I'ma give up on my God, the devil is a lie. The devil is a lie. The devil is a lie.
Hello. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about Bernie Sanders on the Joe Rogan Experience. At least some of it. There's some clips and commentary that's going around on it, and I'm still getting through it. It's hard, man. It just to be frank, because I saw clips going around, and I'm like, well, I think I should watch it, and it's just I wish there was somebody able to fact check Bernie more and push back. And I know Joe just wants to have a conversation, but even some of the stuff they were having a conversation about, just little things that Joe pushed back on, Bernie wasn't quite able to have a good rebuttal, good argument. So we'll be looking at least a clip. Joe Rogan's podcast, folks are very kind of picky about some of these clips going around and stuff. So I can't show too much of the stuff, but I'll tell you what I've seen. Also, interesting polling that has come out after the 2024 election, and I want to go through some of what was discovered by Pew Research. And Trump's, base has really grown with Hispanics and African Americans, and hopefully Republicans will keep up this momentum. And considering the route that the Democrats are going down with embracing democratic socialism, their base, I think, will continue to shrink as it gets more radical, and Republicans will continue to get bigger, especially as long as we can hold it together. But before we jump into everything, I want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the site because it does cost to stream, run my site, all the good stuff you guys can support. It very much. Do appreciate you guys. I do apologize for being a little late. I got back just a little later than I meant to, so it just kind of slowed me up a bit. So thank you for your patience, and again, I do apologize. You guys can go to the website, check out different merch that's available, like different t-shirts and different mugs and so on that I have. I do also have books that you guys can check out. There's a link in the description if you're watching on Facebook and YouTube that'll lead you to my to an Amazon page where you guys can check out some of my books. I have books for children's middle grade books, and I have fiction books and nonfiction books. Like, of course, God is blatantly against abortion, so I recommend that you check out some of that stuff and share it and get it for somebody that you know that likes to read. And maybe you don't like to read, but there's some cool stuff that might spark your curiosity and make you a reader yet. So go ahead and check that out. Anyway, let's hop to it. The first thing I want to touch on is this Bernie stuff. So like I said, I saw some clips going around on TikTok and different people talking about it, and the commentary, at least from folks on the right, the people in the comments on Joe Rogan's podcast, they seem to be Bernie Sanders supporters and stuff or whatever, but people were saying things like, Joe, you can't hide yourself in a conversation for like 2-3 hours. Now the conversation was like 2 hours. But there were simple things that Bernie didn't have an answer to. Like, when you start talking like, well, if you give people a lot of stuff, like what about people's dignity in work? Like, or, when you push them on like, oh, well, it's bad to do all this campaign finance stuff. It's like, okay, but how much did Kamala and them spend? And like, oh, well, Trump is, a dictator because he's suing all these people. And Rogan's like, well, let's look at the lawsuits and talk about the lawsuits. And he just didn't have great answers when he was pushed back. So we're going to watch at least a segment with the, and this is one about the lawsuit stuff. Especially I don't think they got to really break down the ABC one. I don't think. But I out of all the lawsuits, I know the ABC one the most. And Trump definitely was defamed by ABC and George Stephanopoulos, and they deserve to lose that. And so if Trump is going to be the guy who's like, okay, I'm not going to let you guys keep lying on me. Why is that why is that an issue? Especially knowing what George Stephanopoulos was trying to do. And I'll get that video too with Stephanopoulos continue, not the full video, not the full interview, because I think the full interview is like 10 minutes, but I'll play a clip of it just to show you what George Stephanopoulos was doing. So yeah, I think it's totally fine that they decided to go ahead and sue and that Trump won and George Stephanopoulos had to pay. But why does that, make him an authoritarian? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it sounds good. A lot of things with Bernie, listening to the podcast, and again, I haven't got through the whole thing, but it's frustrating because it's just like there's all these power structures and all these rich people, all this power, they're bad, they're evil, and then he just doesn't. I'm like, okay, where's your practical solutions to things? And like at one point, Joe Rogan, Bernie was ranting about powerful people and money and corporations and stuff, and Joe's just like, okay, well, what are you gonna do? And Bernie said something like, well, who makes the laws? And he's like, they do, or something. I'm like, what? I'm like, no, you're a senator, bro. Like, you guys make the laws. Did you know how this works? But let's start with this clip, and then I'll just kind of go from the stuff that I saw. But I want to actually show you guys something first. I don't think we'll have maybe an issue with me playing this TikTok for a little bit. But yeah, they're pretty picky about their clips.
Worries me very, very much is this movement toward authoritarianism and going after media, suing media.
When you say suing media, are you talking about the CBS lawsuit?
Among other things.
Right, but don't you think there's a real issue with what they did?
No.
You don't think that there's a real issue in editing conversations to give someone an answer that's different than what they really answered?
Joe, I've been on 8 zillion shows, right? In my life.
Okay.
Now, should I sue you if you ask me some stupid question that I don't like, right? Or that you do something? Should I sue you?
Yeah, but that's not what he's getting.
Well, he is sued. He is sued.
Yeah, so there's Bernie misrepresenting the lawsuits. Like, no. Oh, should I be able to sue you? Someone, if I'm asked a stupid question, I hope you can't, because Joe would be able to sue you right now, Bernie. That's a misrepresentation of what's going on. Like, if you're gonna have a conversation and take down people's ideology or whatever, be honest about what they say and what's actually going on, the facts of the matter, especially because you brought them up. Especially because you're the one who brought them up, Bernie. So he starts off misrepresenting what's actually going on.
Sued ABC.
Mm-hmm.
He has sued Meta. He is suing the Des Moines Register because of a poll that came out during the campaign that he didn't like. All right. He is suing CBS for this Kamala Harris interview. So do I think I cannot tell you the number of stories done about me that were not good stories.
Right.
That were dishonest stories. That's what a free press is about. You don't like it, you got to live with it.
The free press is about publishing dishonest stories? That's not what the free press is supposed to be about. All the time, I see people reach out to different journalists and stuff and say, this is not true. You need to remove this or I'm going to sue you. And they will issue some kind of correction. They'll update the story. The View, and they talk about the news. Those people are like commentators or whatever, but they'll still issue, legal notes and Sonny had to do a couple this year because they don't want to be taken to town, taken to the woodshed or whatever the saying is, over things that they say that aren't true. Now, I'm not saying I'm with them like all these lawsuits, like the Des Moines Register, which Joe is about to like defend and talk about how people use polling to discourage turnout and stuff. So there's a method to that, and I don't actually know where that lawsuit, if that was actually filed or he's following through that one. I don't know. The lawsuit about the 60 Minutes interview, they've been trying to settle with Trump, and Trump rejected like a settlement that they offered, which I think he probably should have just took the settlement. But and there's some people within their network who didn't want to have any kind of offer for a settlement, and people like resigned over it. But I probably would have just took that. The ABC one with George Stephanopoulos, I totally think Trump was well within his right to sue. And Joe didn't seem to know the details off the top of his head. I know that one. So we'll get to that. But again, this isn't about people saying stuff that you don't, asking them questions, but the press is not supposed to just be lying on you in paper. That's libel. That's libel. I was watching Spider-Man, the first one with Tobey Maguire, and Jameson was saying some stuff about Spider-Man, making up stories. And Peter's like, hey, Spider-Man was trying to save those people. That's slander. And he's like, I resent that. He's spoken is slander, printed is libel. And so that always just kind of stayed with my brain, like the difference between libel and slander. But you're not supposed to just print things that aren't true, especially if you want to call yourself a journalist. But Bernie wants to defend that. Okay,
all right, you do something. I'm not going to sue you, Joe.
Right, but it's not that simple, right? Like, let's not talk about Trump, but let's talk about another candidate. Let's just imagine there's someone on the right and someone on the left, and there's a concerted effort to promote this person that's on the right. And so the polls are rigged, or these are funded polls that make it look like this person on the right is winning by a substantial margin. And what this does is decreases the motivation that people have to come out and vote against them.
That's happening.
So it's fake.
By the way, that happens right now.
It is happening right now. And I think, is that part of what he's suing them about?
No, but doesn't look.
But isn't that what he's suing them about?
Well, he's suing ABC for one thing.
But with the Des Moines Register about the poll.
Yeah, I know the poll's there.
Was the poll incorrect?
Yeah, the poll was wrong. So what?
Right.
Guess what?
But what did they know it was incorrect when they published it?
No, they published what they thought was an accurate poll. But that pollster, by the way, what's the name? Okay, Seltzer polls.
I should just state for the record, I don't know this lawsuit, but
what it was about.
But I am aware that in talking to people that understand polls, that some of these are politically.
All right, but the answer is yes and no. There are polls right now doing exactly what you say.
Right.
I could doctor a poll. I could talk to more conservative, more progressive people, get the results that I kind of want, right?
And they do it to motivate people or demotivate people to vote, and it's effective.
It has an impact. All right. On the other hand, this particular poster, that's the Des Moines Register, not a huge newspaper. I bumped into them because when you're running Democratic primaries, Iowa is a big deal. They are a very, very respected pollster. Okay. They don't doctor polls. So they made a mistake on a poll. It turns out they had Trump doing worse than he ended up doing. Guess what? Posters, honest posters, make mistakes too.
But what is the base?
Yeah, so I believe what Joe is like saying is happening, that they did the poll trying to suppress turnout or whatever, is the concern from Trump. Whether they just got it really wrong or they were really trying to suppress turnout, I don't know, and I don't know why Bernie is saying that with such confidence. But that lawsuit, he can pursue things that he wants to pursue. I necessarily wouldn't jump on that one, but Bernie thinks his ABC one is not worth pursuing. That's crazy to me. But we'll keep watching this clip.
Basis of his lawsuit, like what is he saying in
I
the
think
lawsuit?
he is saying that gave energy to his opponents, and that it was. He's
like
saying,
we talked about,
like you talked
Yeah.
about, but I don't believe that's the case. There are honest pollsters
Okay.
who make mistakes.
But what about the other the other lawsuit with the conversation that they had with Kamala Harris, where they edited the answers that she had to make it look more precise?
60 Minutes, they were suing 60 Minutes.
Yes.
Is, to my mind, historically, they've been around for a very long time. You know, they're not infallible, but I think you look at most objective people will say 60 Minutes has a sterling reputation for investigative journalism. Are they wrong?
But that's not investigative journalism if you change someone's answers. If you ask her a question and she comes with a rambling answer that doesn't make sense, and you edit that out and insert another answer to a different question that seems more cogent.
Joe, you're walking down, you're walking down a dangerous path. Suing media has the impact of intimidating media. All right, if somebody sues you, all right, let me finish. All right.
Okay.
Somebody sues you, why not you? You could be sued tomorrow, right? Because you are doing this. You're too sympathetic to this.
Right.
And Joe, you did that, and they have a big law firm behind you, and you're going to have to spend zillions of dollars defending yourself. You know what? Next time you do an interview, you say, maybe I'm not going to go in that area. Right?
No, but it's not that. It's editing things to make this deceptive editing.
Joe,
so in deceptive editing, I don't give people a different perception of who this candidate is than reality.
Right,
okay. Bernie has a point that you could sue people on the basis to intimidate them or whatever. But you should like have credible things that you're suing people over. But the fact that you could sue people for lying about you and doing shady things, shouldn't that incentivize people to tell correct stories, to report fairly, to not doctor videos, to not defame candidates with some really serious allegations? You know, does the Nicholas Sandmann lawsuit, persuade news organizations to not try to harm the reputation of kids for just smiling in the future? maybe news organizations, come on, we know they pick teams. They do. And some of these journalists, many of these journalists, have such a strong bias. And if you could just do your job and do it fairly, it's fine that you have a bias. It's fine that you vote for the candidate that you like. If you're going to report the news, and even how you report the news how you report some facts and choose to leave others out, you can be manipulative with just saying true things. Okay. If you leave certain details out, you can. So there's all kinds of ways you can still be dishonest to your audience. But if you try to be fair, it's okay what you do in the voting booth. But a lot of these people, they're not fair, especially to Donald Trump. By the way, some of these people took their mask off and even said things along the lines of Donald Trump is different. We have to treat him different because he's a bigger threat. So they throw objectivity out the window. They treat him much harsher. They don't believe him. Do you guys recall when Donald Trump was talking about the COVID and Wuhan lab or whatever, and was saying that, there was the virus had come from there and different things, and people didn't want to believe it when obviously it just seemed like the thing that made the most sense. Colbert, no, it wasn't Colbert. Somebody went on Colbert. It was John. Is it John Stewart? Like, that's the name of a Green Lantern. Is it? Is that also the name of the journalist? Yes. Jon Stewart. He went on Colbert Show and made a pretty funny joke about it, like it was clearly like COVID and being done by the Wuhan Lab Institute, like obviously. And he started making up stories like, chocolatey goodness just broke out. Could it be because of the chocolate factory? You know? So Trump said that very early on, and people tried to pretend like he was crazy, talking about a lab leak and all that stuff. The media, while he was president of the United States, they were acting like he was crazy. And so eventually people started to accept that that was the reality. And I remember there was a news broadcast and like the narrative was like, oh, and they said this, like, oh, well, Donald Trump was right, but he has such a sketchy sort of reputation. Like, you got to kind of forgive us for not just taking him at his word. And so I don't remember what news organization it was, but at the time I responded to, and I did a skit on TikTok where they say that basically. And then there's just like a flashback of all these things the media constantly did to ruin his reputation. Saying that he peed on Russian prostitutes, or that he was afraid of stairs, or and just on and on and on. Russia's puppet and Russia collusion stuff, and mentioning Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, trying to discredit him because he used to do crack cocaine. Lots of things that they did to just tear down Trump in a circle to make him not credible, And a lot of politicians, you got to take him with a grain of salt, and you got to look at the facts and make sure that they're telling the truth. I'm not saying you have to just give Trump the benefit of the doubt, any of these people just the benefit of the doubt, but they've done a lot to sow discourse and to just make him a clown, So they should have just had common sense with the lab leak and tried to verify the facts instead of Trump saying a thing and be like, oh, we have to reject the thing because he said it. That's not what news organizations are supposed to do. So these folks just they need to learn. They need to learn to do better. And they need to be better. Washington Post, they have their catchphrase, or was their catchphrase, that democracy dies in darkness. They feel that they are so important and they are doing such a service to the American people. And I think they are. They go out and they do important investigative reporting. And sometimes, Rush Limbaugh used to say they do random active journalism to just kind of report the truth or whatever. I think their job is important, but it's because their job is important. It's important that they do it honestly. And some of these lawsuits, especially the ABC one that Bernie keeps trying to dismiss, was terribly dishonest. Terribly dishonest. Let's keep watching this video, and then I will show you what this ABC lawsuit was about.
But you got to explain.
But that's not objective journalism.
I know, but
that's campaigning for that person.
Right, but
would you agree with that?
I don't have those details. I don't know that I agree with your analysis of it. I don't know enough.
I think that's universally accepted that that's what they did.
And you got to tell me why he is suing ABC. Why he's suing Meta.
You brought it up.
The 60 Minutes.
No,
one
but,
first.
no, but it's not just 60.
Go to ABC.
You got to tell me, bro. You brought it up. You brought it up. Why does the podcaster who does MMA and commentary for UFC have to inform you about a topic you brought up? And not only did you bring it up, you think it's evidence that like Trump is evil. And you don't know the details of the thing that you brought up and you are discussing. This was so wild to me. I'll tell him why Trump sued ABC.
BC, but I'm not aware of that
Well,
one
as
either.
George Stephanopoulos said something that he didn't like. But the point is,
what did Stephanopoulos say?
I can't remember. It was I honestly don't remember. But
well, I think what he was saying was factually incorrect about the results of one of Trump's trials.
All right. Guess what? If I were to sue everybody who said things that were factually incorrect about me, I'd be suing people zillions of times. But Joe, what you're saying is, look, does media get it wrong sometimes? Absolutely. Should you have the most powerful person in America suing media? What is the impact of that? The impact is clearly intimidation.
My concern is when you have
media or accountability. Or it's accountability. Like, oh, George Stephanopoulos said something Trump doesn't like. Oh, Joe is right. He said something factually incorrect about the trial. Joe is right about that. They don't remember the details. I do. I do. So that's what's so annoying about what Bernie is saying, because what he said was serious.
Organizations that are purported to be objective, and then they say things that are defamatory and factually incorrect, and they should know that before they say it. What other course does a person have other than a lawsuit? And isn't it important that you shine the light on what is a political bias?
Then where
from an organization that you would hope would be objective.
Needless to say, I get attacked all the time by right-wing media, right? Every day.
Needless to say.
All right. I don't sue them. So you expose
but they
him.
Don't say,
then he's the president.
And I don't doubt that people have said things about Bernie that's not true. But I would have liked an example of, like, I'm gonna check people saying stuff about what's an example that rises to the level of something that George Stephanopoulos did. What's an example? Maybe he should sue. I don't know, but and he can choose to let it go. But I'd like to know an example of something that people said that's on the level of what George Stephanopoulos said about Donald Trump. And he just waved it like, oh, well, he said something he didn't like. Maybe it's easy for Bernie to dismiss lies because he's a liar. Maybe it's easy for him to dismiss stuff because he doesn't care about the details and getting them right. Because he just has to have a narrative. He just has to have a dogma that certain people are bad, capitalism bad, corporations bad, businesses bad. You know, oligarchy, blah, blah, blah. But the details don't matter.
Of the United States.
Do they say things factually incorrect, that are defamatory and slanderous?
If there's anybody in the world who knows how to use a microphone, his name is Donald Trump. And Donald Trump get up. You saw that program on CBS the other day? It was crap. It was wrong. And let me tell you why it was wrong.
But then they do it again and again and again.
Then you take them on.
The problem is, the more people do stuff like that, if you don't have any consequences to what you're doing, you're going to continue that path. And the most people only see that. They're not, like, if you're a left-wing leaning media organization and you print something that's factually incorrect, or you say something on television that's factually incorrect, your viewers who are left-leaning are most likely not going to see Trump's rebuttal in some speech that he does in the middle of Pennsylvania.
Right, but that's another problem. But all I would say is...
So you don't think that lawsuits against that are valid?
I don't think that it is appropriate for the President of the United States to be, in my view, intimidating media. Again, I get attacked. I'll be attacked tomorrow for probably things I've said on the show.
But he was running for the president at the time when this stuff happened. So you could be like, oh, we're the president now, you can just let it go. But he started like this process while he was not the president of the United States. So
I'll get attacked. Then if I want to respond, I respond. I have a not a president's bullet. I have a bullet.
And by the way, they went full throttle trying to put this man in jail while he was a candidate to stop him using the legal system and convicting him of like a nonsense thing that should have been not a felony, that should have been a misdemeanor, that already should have been timed out. So they did so many shady things against Trump. They treat him differently than everybody else because in their minds they just tell themselves, they convince themselves that they have to throw every sort of rule book in the garbage because he's so dangerous. That's what the media has done. That's what they did with the legal system. Well, I don't know if you can say that, because people do shady stuff with the legal system all the time. As a matter of fact, when I explained to my cousin what they did to Trump, she said, "Oh, so they treated Donald Trump like they treat black men." So a lot of people are sympathetic to how they treat Trump because they've treated him unfairly. Like Trump wasn't like running away with the primary until people started to come against him legally. DeSantis had a shot, but as soon as they was raiding Mar-a-Lago, his chances shot up because people who maybe abandoned him or were kind of done with them, just kind of annoyed. They're like, oh, they're coming after him this hard. Oh, they must be really threatened by him. Oh, they're trying to make me abandon him. Well, I got to get more indignant. I got to stand by him. If they wanted Trump to go away, they should have let him just be gone. But they attacked him nonstop, even after he left the White House. So being like, well, he's a president now, he shouldn't be suing people. They should have acted right on the campaign trail. They should have acted right. This is he can say it's unbecoming of a president to be suing people, but it's unbecoming what the media did to him.
I say, you see that thing on Fox? They're wrong. And I've done it.
I also agree that CBS shouldn't be altering a presidential candidate's interview.
I agree too. I mean, I don't know enough about it, so I'm not going to say what is isn't. Okay. All I know is that 60 Minutes is a well-respected program. Do they make mistakes?
But that's not a mistake.
All right. I don't know enough about it, so I can't.
I understand.
All right. What else you got for me? I should get a plane to get out of here.
This is so funny. I had watched this earlier, but some of the stuff I had forgotten. Like when he was like, well, George said something he didn't like. That's a heck of a way to describe what happened. Okay. But in case you didn't watch, you weren't here when we watched the beginning, when that video started out, Bernie's like, well, I don't know enough about it. He is the one who brought them up as a point to show that Trump is an authoritarian. Bernie brought it up, and Joe's like, okay, let's look at the actual details to see what's actually going on and if it's justified. And bro, I don't know what he said. Okay, so let's look at what George said. Now, this segment between George Stephanopoulos and Nancy Mace is more than this 2 minutes that I'm going to be showing. It's longer than that. I think it might have been about 10 minutes. I'm not going to play the whole 10-minute thing. And we covered this at the time, so many of you obviously know about this story. But for those of you who don't, let's stroll down. Well, I'll inform the ones of you who do not. And for those of you who do, let's just go down memory lane for a little bit.
Yes, this morning. And you've endorsed Donald Trump for president. Judges and 2 separate juries have found him liable for rape and for defaming the victim of that rape. How do you square your endorsement of Donald Trump with the testimony we just saw?
Well, I will tell you, I was raped at the age of 16. And any rape victim will tell you, I lived for 30 years with a incredible amount of shame over being raped. I didn't come forward because of that judgment and shame that I felt. And it's a shame that you will never feel, George. And I'm not going to sit here on your show and be asked a question meant to shame me about another potential rape victim. I'm not going to do that.
So I just want to say, Nancy Mace, I'm not a big fan of Nancy Mace. She seems like a lot of drama. um, but this answer was such a good response. And I'm assuming that she was well prepped because it was such a good answer to George to push back on this news story. And obviously, she would have known before going on the show about the case, and that the media will do things like, "Oh, this happened. Why are you supporting Trump? Don't you denounce Trump, et cetera, et cetera." So I'm assuming that maybe it's so good. It just seems like it's hard to be a top of the head answer. If it is a top of the head answer, really kudos to her. It's fine if it's prepared and they thought about it. And it's a good response for sure, because George Stephanopoulos used that to try to shame Nancy Mace, and he's going to deny that, but that's obviously what he did and will continue trying to do. But here's the thing. George Stephanopoulos is wrong. The court did not find Trump liable for rape. And you might be saying, that's such a weird thing. What does that even mean? It means that E. Jean Carroll, I don't want to say too much about Miss Carroll because she's a little, she liked to sue people, okay, for saying true things about her. But she's the person who told Anderson Cooper that she thinks that rape is sexy. Okay. But she claimed that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her. And Donald Trump was like, that's crazy, that didn't happen, and said some stuff about her. And so she's like, oh, well, he's defaming my character. And if she's saying stuff that's a lie, like, why wouldn't he respond to me like, no, she's crazy, she's lying? But okay. So she sued him. So the court had to deem whether or not what she said was true to see if he defamed her. So when it came to the allegation that Trump raped her, they didn't think that was true. They didn't think that was true. George said that he was liable for rape. That's not true. Now, they did decide to say he was liable for sexual assault. That's what they went with. And to me, that it sort of reads like they didn't want him to get off the hook, but they knew that she was full of crap, so they couldn't go for the full-on rape thing. So they split the baby somehow to get him something. And so you'll see after this lawsuit, Democrats were really, really careful about how they phrase this story. And they'll say liable for sexual assault, but George Stephanopoulos said liable for rape, and that the court found him liable for rape. It's just not true. And he kept repeating it. I think at one point in time, maybe in the full clip, in the full interview, like Nancy like tried to give him an out and a correction, and he like just wouldn't go with it, but he kept repeating it and repeating it. And I will tell you, to this day, you will find TikTok lives of people insisting that Donald Trump was found liable for rape. I went on someone's live, I don't know, a couple months ago, and I tried to correct them about the stuff, and they, end up like kicking me off and blocking me. So some people don't want to know the truth, but there are people who still believe this, and you'll see it in comments everywhere. People say it online, on TikTok, on X, all kinds of different places. They still believe that he was found liable, and this was a civil court. This wasn't a criminal court, as Nancy Mace will point out. But they'll say, "Oh, Trump is a rapist." I'm like, "Well, how do you know that? Where's your evidence?" "Oh, this lawsuit or whatever." "Oh, okay, well, the court found the opposite." That's not true. But folks like George, this is ABC. This isn't MSNBC. Again, this isn't MSNBC where everybody just expects a little wackiness. This is ABC. And he repeated this multiple times. It's not just him saying something that Trump didn't like. This is a serious allegation, and it's the opposite of what the court found. That's way more serious. Like, oh, we said something in like, oh, someone asked a dumb question. He said something that's not true. Saying something that's not true, like if someone got on a live and said Christina went to the comic book store yesterday, that's not true. I don't know why you'd say that. Maybe it was Wednesday, comic book day. Maybe it was a safe assumption. I haven't really did the comic book go to the store on comic book day for a while now, but not a terrible guess if you wanted to go on a live podcast and claim that. There's no reason for me to sue you for saying that. I might be like, I didn't do that yesterday. Accusing somebody of raping someone, I think that's a lot different. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just me. It's the seriousness. I just don't think it's as flippant as Bernie Sanders tried to make it seem. But we'll keep watching this argument between Nancy Mace and George because it got a little heated.
It's actually not about shaming you. It's a question about Donald
you
Trump.
are shaming me.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president.
Right.
Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury. Donald Trump has been found liable for defaming the victim of that rape by a jury. It's been affirmed by a judge.
It was not a criminal court case, number one. Number two, I live with shame. And you're asking me a question about my political choices, trying to shame me as a rape victim. And I find it disgusting. And quite frankly, E. Jean Carroll's comments when she did get the judgment, joking about what she was going to buy, it makes it harder for women to come forward when they make a mockery out of rape, when they joke about it.
Doesn't it make it harder for women to come forward when they?
It makes it harder when other women joke about it, and she's joked about it. I find it offensive, and I also find it offensive that you're trying to shame me with this question.
I'm not trying to shame you.
You are.
In fact,
I have dealt with this for 30 years. You know how hard it was to tell my story 5 years ago when they were doing a fetal heartbeat bill and there were no exceptions for rape, incest, or rape or incest in there. I had to tell my story because no other woman was coming forward. No rape victims were represented. And you're trying to shame me this morning.
I'm just asking.
And I find it offensive. And this is why women won't come forward.
Women won't come forward because they're defamed by those who perpetrate rape.
They are judged and they're shamed. And you're trying to shame me this morning. I think it's disgusting.
I'm not shaming you at all.
I told my story. It took me 25 years to tell my story. I was judged for it. I still get judged for it today.
I'm asking you a very simple question.
Yeah, he's asking a very simple question, and he clearly meant to shame her for voting for Donald Trump. She had him dead to rights on that. That was like preparing, because sometimes, I've been invited on the news to speak for a topic I wasn't like thrilled about specifically. It was about Trump. Like it was during the story when like some of the Stormy Daniels stuff popped up. And I didn't know that I was going to be on during that segment. And I was like, I don't know what to say because I'm not defending this man. and it's still funny to me, like, like when the camera panned to my face and I'm just like, looking like, I ain't defending this man. Like, you could just clearly tell from my face I was upset. I handle the rest of the segments fine, but and then somebody else I knew was like, man, people lie to their wives. I'm like, bro, like really? Like you ain't got to shill like for people when they do wrong or whatever. But that was like when that story was just kind of really fresh. But it's an unfortunate story with that had come out when they asked her to come on. So she had to figure out a way to kind of bypass him. And he clearly did use that story to try to shame her for her support of Trump. And she had something that she could use against him to turn it back on him. It's kind of reminiscent, but not quite as brilliant as when Ben Shapiro went on Piers Morgan's show and how he just was railing against firearms in the Second Amendment, like constantly nonstop. And so he had brought Ben on, and Ben Shapiro just had a plan to come in guns a-blazing. And he's just like, night after night, you stand on the bodies of dead children to rail against the Second Amendment. And Pierce was like, how dare you? And he's like, I've seen you do it, Pierce. I've seen you do it. Like you bring up these dead children and in these tragic situations to try to like rail against the Second Amendment. And apparently Pierce had children, I think in the audience, victims of gun violence or something that he was going to like try to point to at some point in the show, but he couldn't do that because Ben called him out. So if he tried to do that tactic after Ben brought it up, he just would have looked so terrible. So and Ben, like, and I brought it, he's like, I have a constitution, I brought one for you. And it was a moment that really made Ben like pretty famous. There was that and the Dr. Oz show that really made him famous too, but the Pierce thing was quite incredible. But you have to have a plan, because you have to understand when you're going on any kind of media that they have an agenda when they interview you, and you have to find a way to turn that around to fit whatever your agenda is. So you may have two different goals. You may be going on a friendly podcast where they want to make you look good, or you may be in enemy territory. And if you're going to accept going on there, you have to find a way to somehow spin it in the direction that you want, and to get the talking points out that you want to tell, so the audience hears you. And they're looking at you through how you want to be perceived, rather than how the journalist wants you to be perceived. So that's one of the first things they ought to teach you in campaign school. When I first ran for office, I ran for state rep. And one of the first things the Oakland County chair gave me was a book about the media. He's like, read this. Read this. So George totally had a plan there. So I don't appreciate Bernie Sanders. I don't. Anna said every single morning on C-SPAN, callers call him a 34 convicted felon and a rapist, and the moderator never makes a correction. Yeah, that's messed up. That's unfortunate. People still believe it. People still go by it. So yes, George Stephanopoulos and ABC got sued by Trump, and they won. They got their money. And George had to also pay, not just ABC, but George had to pay too. I think he paid into like the Trump Presidential Library or something. But good. And you know what? You did see after this, and that the lawsuit and stuff, you did at least see Democrats be very particular about their phrasing, and they say liable for sexual assault rather than saying liable for rape. And you know, I don't like either outcome, especially, but you know, one is definitely worse. And they probably miss just saying the R word, but they didn't want to get sued. So it's about accountability. It's funny when people on the left, and I'm not saying Bernie was into cancel culture, but a lot of they're so they would defend cancel culture and just say, oh, it's about accountability. But is it not accountability suing people for libel? Especially when you have them dead to rights. Come on. Other things that Bernie said, you know, that I saw on Joe Rogan, they opened up talking about, you know, corruption and businesses and, you know, billionaires and all this stuff, and what's wrong with the state of the world, and, you know, how people moved. He compares about the big things and like how, and things you can agree with. Like, is it a problem that so many businesses are under the umbrella of just like a couple of like corporations? You know, I think we think that that's maybe like an issue, a problem. You know, he talked about how back in the day you used to go to a factory or something, and someone local or someone you knew kind of owned that space. And now it's like everything is owned by some conglomerate or whatever. And he talked about jobs being sent overseas, and people paying, you know, folks in Mexico and other places to do manufacturing and towns and like in different cities like Detroit just being gutted because, you know, people move their jobs. But at the same time, he's upset that the minimum federal rate wage isn't what he wants, and he wants things like that raised. So it's like, okay, Bernie, the real minimum wage is $0. So if you want to keep raising the price of, keep raising wages artificially, it's these mega corporations that you are railing against that can find a way to pay people those wages. Like Amazon can figure it out. Walmart can figure it out. These mom and pop shops that you seem to idealize, and these small businesses, you know, that do manufacturing or whatever, they're the ones who are going to have an issue being able to keep up with demand. If people can pay you well and they need to pay you competitively to be able to do the work, that's what people will do if they can afford it, and if that's what the market demands. But if you artificially raise the wages on a business that can't afford to pay people, they're not going to be able to hire employees. You can skirt around it, get around those by laws or whatever by having family members or whatever do the work, but that doesn't mean they're not going to want to, or that there's going to be enough people there to do the jobs. And it's been an attitude of a lot of Democrats that will just say, oh, well, if you can't afford to pay people a living wage, you don't deserve to exist. And that was FDR's attitude, by the way. And I think that's just pretty evil. Like, who are you to say what I can pay my employees? Like, I will do what I have to make my business work. If I can't afford to pay what they want, they can go elsewhere. But I'm not doing it to be a jerk. This is where I'm at. Because if you can meet people's needs, like he talked about people just like not caring about their employees and all this other stuff. There's companies that do deeply care about work-life balance of their employees because they know it's a draw. Like my cousin got a job somewhere recently, and they were talking about they have a chiropractor. They just had a company trip to like Cedar Point, which is a pretty impressive amusement park and stuff. And part of his job is to do marketing about how cool it is to work there because they want to recruit good talent, and they'll pay people through their training sessions and teach them a lot of good tools that they could choose to take elsewhere, but they're hoping that they'll stay with the company. So people understand that if you treat employees well, that they'll want to be there, and they'll want to be there long term. Not all companies are evil jerks who want to just run their employees to the ground. You can definitely work at those kind of companies, and there's definitely companies that can make you feel that way. I felt like Target made me feel that way. I hated that place, okay? But not every job made me feel that way. But when I did start to feel that way, it was time for me to go, because if I feel like you're taking advantage of me, I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna kick the dust off my feet and move on if I can. And I'll be looking. I'll stay there till I find something else. but and it is funny hearing Bernie talk about like, well, in my day, people could work at these factories and they could do this and that, but he doesn't have stories of him doing these types of things because he didn't really ever hold like a normal job, or I think really a job. So it's just like these stories from other people's lives, and this old man, he doesn't really have like the blue collar experience that he's trying to relate to and stand up for. I'm not necessarily saying that you have to, but he's a commie. He's always been a lazy commie. So he doesn't have good practical solutions for people. Like if you want to just keep raising those wages, you're going to keep incentivizing people to have this stuff done overseas where it's cheap. So at the end of the day, what are you going to do, Bernie? Just seize the means of production? Like, say these businesses can't leave and you have to pay this much or else? Like, what are you going to do? Because you're not going to make it so that all these small businesses can flourish if you make them all pay $25 an hour. They can't make it. They can't make it. This is not how it works. This is not how it works. Another thing that was interesting, and I saw this clip go around, Bernie Sanders was talking about campaign finance. I think I actually got to this part of the interview. And he yeah, I did actually, because he said that Citizens United, which ended up like expanding like the campaign finance and made it so that you like your money is an extension of your like free speech. And he said that that was the worst Supreme Court decision ever. And I'm like, that's pretty bold to think that's worse than like, I don't know, Dred Scott. I'm like, I wish I was there instead of Joe. And I'd be like, the worst one, really? The worst one. I haven't read up on students. I mean, people reference it all the time, but Citizens United. If I think there was a movie that someone was making about Hillary Clinton, and they didn't want it to be made, and and that's, I think, where the kind of popped up, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. In 2008, Citizens United produced a documentary film highly critical of Hillary Clinton and called Hillary the Movie, freeing prosecution from the FEC. The organization saw a declaratory judgment in federal court to assure their right to show the movie, leading ultimately to the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission. It previously produced and screened advertisements attacking other Democrats, including Bill Clinton, John Kerry, and Al Gore. In the 1988 U.S. presidential election, Citizens United ran an ad and used Willie Horton to attack Democratic nominee Michael Dukakis. The group has produced a film criticizing you. I'm just reading through Wikipedia real quick. Yeah, so they did produce a movie, and that's kind of how it spawned off. Anyway, I just thought it was funny, but he complained about how much money that Elon spent in the election for Trump, and Joe immediately asked, like, okay, what's the highest dollar amount that was given to Kamala? And Bernie didn't know, and he's like, well, they raised a lot of money, and they're like $1.5 billion in that they spent in a couple months. In a couple months, guys, it was insane how much money they raised. And then she lost, and they spent so much on so much stupid stuff. You know, I think you know, Bernie tried to do like, oh, both sides will do it and it's bad or whatever. But I don't think he was going to bring up Kamala in her campaign. But what about like George Soros? He spends his money on so many things, funding. He'll bring up, you know, all these politicians to take their selfies. And George Soros has used his wealth to radically change the landscape of our justice system. Like if you see a lot of crime and you're like, why aren't they prosecuting these people? Why are they just releasing them back into the streets? A lot of it is because of George Soros, and they fund all kinds of other crazy stuff as well. So it is always interesting that a lot of these people who think that we should get money out of politics are so gung-ho about keeping money in politics and spending a lot of money in politics. Like George Clooney, you know, he complains about so much money being made in being spent in politics, but he's a big donor. that night, Joe Biden was like creeping across the stage. That was a George Clooney fundraiser. So they like to spend it. They'll complain, but they'll spend it. And one of Bernie's solutions was that candidates should be publicly funded. Like if you get your signatures and the people, then our taxpayer dollars should just pay for people's campaigns. That's wild to me. That's wild to me. You know. I don't pay for no Democrat nothing. Sorry. Sorry. So I'm just annoyed by Bernie's stuff, man. And another, I think this is probably the last thing that I'll mention. He brought up how Donald Trump will criticize Brian. Oh gosh, there's another thing I wanted to talk about. I'll talk about two more things and then I'll move on. I'm sorry we talked about this topic for like an hour. Brian Mast, he was brought up, and Bernie was complaining about how Trump will attack him specifically about his stance on I think they mentioned the big beautiful bill, but like they talked about Israel and his stance about that. And so he didn't think it was right that Donald Trump was like, oh, well, I'm gonna primary you, which people do that all the time. I don't love that Trump is so quick to pull the trigger on I'm gonna make sure that you're taken out, which by the way, Brian Massey, the people who vote for him really like him. You know, that his constituents feel like he sticks up for liberty and he's consistent. And Trump has tried to primary Massey before, and he has not come out positive on the positive end for that. So I don't know. He probably should just not keep trying to pick on Massey, respond to Massey. There have been Republicans who are very solid conservatives that disagreed with Trump, that Trump worked to get out and replace. And I don't like that he does that either. Sometimes it depends why he's attacking them. He's, you know, but Bernie's like, oh, people should be allowed to voice their opinions. I'll use the word triggered. It triggered me because I recall when Trump was president the first time around, and he wanted his people to go through Senate confirmations hearings, and Russell Vought was going through confirmations, and Russell Vought is also in the administration again. But Bernie Sanders was grilling him about his Christian convictions. You guys may recall that because Bernie Sanders did get called out about like the constitutionality of what he was doing, because it seemed like he was issuing a religious test. But Russell Vought went to a Christian college and he wrote a paper about the centrality of Jesus Christ. You're a Christian, guess what? You got to believe that Jesus Christ is God, that he was crucified, and that he rose again. And he wrote something about Muslims and how they don't believe that, they don't know God or something like that. And so Bernie Sanders was so offended. And Russell Vought was like, I believe that everyone deserves human dignity and should be treated respectfully. But I went to a Christian college and I'm writing about the centrality of my faith, and this is our doctrine. And Bernie just went off on him. And he's like, I don't think this is what our country's about, so I'm gonna vote no. Okay, bigot. You're a bigot. Okay. And what's funny about that is the Young Turks had put that exchange up, and they labeled it as Bernie Sanders destroys religious bigot. Why is it okay for Muslims to reject that Jesus is God and to believe that we're wrong, and that Jesus is going to come back and tell us all that we're wrong? You know, some of them believe that he escaped to India, wasn't crucified or whatever. Why is it okay for them to say things that totally disprove our faith? But is that okay for us to say things that are true about our faith? So I don't appreciate Bernie saying like, well, we all need to be able to voice our opinions, when you made it seem like you weren't going to vote for this man because he was a Christian. So that upset me. The last thing I want to mention though about this, Bernie Sanders brought up the war in Israel. I mean, the war for Gaza or whatever. And he did say that Hamas is a terrorist organization. He did say that October the 7th was terrible. And he did say that Israel has a right to defend itself. But then he went on to say that he thought that what Bibi was doing was terrible, and that, you know, that they've gone too far. And he said that they were starving people, which they are giving food to people, and actually Hamas is trying to stop them because they would steal aid, steal food, and sell it at a higher price to people. So much so that when people get food, they're like, we don't have to pay for this? Like, what? So they don't like that they took away this power dynamic that Hamas had over the people. So he was saying some untrue things, but he said, you know, they've gone too far, and he said that's why I did a bill trying to defund Israel and not send them any money and stuff. And these Republicans, they wouldn't support me, you know, because they're afraid of, you know, going against Israel or whatever. And I just thought, when I heard that, I'm like, all these people who say things like Israel has a right to defend itself, what does that even mean? It just, like, there's some people who I'm like, you seem like you're pretty anti-Israel most of the time, or you're kind of even anti-Semitic at points of time. But they'll even say like, oh, well, Israel has a right to defend itself. But what does that mean? It just sounds like a pandering sort of thing that's a blanket sort of statement. I don't know, like you could get from a Hallmark card or something. But what do you actually mean? You know, if I get into a fight with somebody and I defend myself, because they come at me and punch me, and I fight them back, I fight them off. Maybe if it's a guy, you know, I might need to use a weapon. Maybe I have to take their life in order to preserve mine. You know, and people be like, okay, well that was self-defense. Like we have that in our mind, like, okay, well, you have a right to defend yourself, but we're not really talking about a scuffle. The question should be, do you have do you think that Israel has a right, or is justified rather, in pursuing war? That's really the question. Like, it's not no brainer. Terrorists came in and killed like 1,200 people and kidnapped a bunch of their folks. Like, no brainer. They have a right to defend themselves, but they're pursuing their enemy, and they have objectives that they need to meet. It's a full-on war. Do they have the right to do that? And a lot of these people don't think that they do. That's what really should be asked. Not, do you have the right to defend yourself? It means nothing. It means not. And what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, what lengths should they be able to go to retrieve their people? Because they still have 50 hostages that are missing. So their objectives are get the hostages back, destroy Hamas, like make sure they're not in leadership, and make sure that they can't do this kind of stuff again. So they are still missing people. They have severely crippled Hamas, and then they went into Hezbollah, and they went into Iran. So they've severely damaged them, sure. But Hamas still doesn't want to give it power. But I'll see people say like, oh, well, Israel, they did lose these people on October the 7th, but so many people have died in Gaza, and Israel hasn't lost that many people. What was it, Patton, who said you don't win wars by not dying, you win wars by killing the other people? But like making somebody else die for their country, I think is what the line is. It's not a tit for tat. You're not doing like a it's not like a turn by turn some game that you play. It's war. And if they are losing that badly, they should concede. Hamas should say, we give up. We're going to give up our leadership. Here's your people back. But they haven't done that. So they haven't achieved their objective. And Piers Morgan, he's been very critical. And people say, well, what should they do? And he's like, well, not this. That's not a good enough answer. That's not a good enough answer. And people like have it in their mind proportionality, because they haven't lost that many people since it began, but there's a lot of casualties in Gaza. But proportionality, as far as international law, isn't about like, oh well, we kill one person, so you got to kill another person. That doesn't make any sense. They measure proportionality based on each operation, and they weigh the objective of that operation versus, what kind of collateral there might be. It's not like an overall number or a certain thing that you hit or you don't hit. So people are misunderstanding how that's applied regardless. But do they have the right to pursue their objectives? That's really what people should be asked. I don't think it means anything. When you say they have a right to defend it, it's just a chant. Like all lives matter. It's just a chant. But if you don't, and really, if you believe they have a right to defend themselves, do they have a right to defend themselves from what they see as an existential threat? I've said this many times. If they have a monster at the foot of their bed that wants to eat their children, should they just leave the monster there? You either have to leave, which I'm sure they would like, a lot of, Arabs would like, their enemies would like. That doesn't mean that they won't be pursued once they leave, by the way. But the other option is that you destroy the monster. And that's what they got to do. So Bernie's saying they have a right to defend themselves, but oh, by the way, I really want to defund them. That's meaningless. Well, maybe not meaningless. I think that still makes you look terrible, Bernie. Makes you look absolutely terrible. Okay. Last thing I want to mention before I let you go. We started late and now we are way over, but it's okay. I wanted to chat about these results, these polling results. Let me find them real quick. So I think it's Pew Research. Yeah, Pew Research 2024 election analysis. And here's some key takeaways. Trump's base has nearly doubled with Hispanics and tripled with blacks since 2016, decreased by 10 points among whites. Democrats have decreased a total of 6 points among blacks, and Hispanics increased 4 points among whites. What's up with y'all white people? What's up with y'all white people? But yeah, Trump has really grown his base with Hispanics. A lot of people do not like illegal immigration. And it's not just that. There's different things that people have fled, or their grandparents have fled, that they've heard from communism, Cuba, or other kinds of different stuff, that they don't want to take root in America. And a lot of these people, these communities are very religious. And the Democrats are just like, you guys are bigots all day long. And they're trying to force them to accept things that they don't like, haven't liked. And it's not just well, you can do your thing. I might not like it, but you could be free and I'll be free. It's like, no, you have to affirm this stuff. And your children will have this graphic gay content in their schools. Why should Catholic Hispanics be okay with that? Why should evangelical black folks be okay with that? Why? So I think it's beyond just immigration, which Trump is very popular with, but the trans issue, that's an 80-20 issue. The immigration popular is very popular with Trump's side, So Democrats, their bases, they're shrinking, man. 15% of Biden's 2020 voters didn't vote in 2024, 5% for Trump. 11% of Trump 2020 voters didn't vote in 2024. 3% voted for Harris. And 14% of people who didn't vote in 2024 voted for Trump in 2024. 12% voted for Harris. So that's an interesting stat. I did retweet this if anyone wants to go look at this themselves. Americans who didn't vote in 2016 but did in 2020 supported Biden by 5 points. Americans who didn't vote in 2020 but did in 2024 supported Trump by 12 points. That makes sense. I mean, 2020 was a pretty crazy year. My dad actually didn't vote for Trump in 2020 because he was so sick he couldn't go to the polls. We're like, you really about to not vote for Trump? Like what? He was really sick though. And we didn't have a my mom had like thrown out his absentee ballot. She's like, we always just go to the polls. And they were not about to give him an emergency ballot. I called the clerk and they did not appreciate being asked on like election day. Trump support growth among certain demographics in 2016 to 2024. Whites +1, blacks +9, Latinos +20, Asians +10 since 2020, white men -3, white women +4. I guess with white women, all you had to go was up, man. Since 2020, black men +9, black women +5. Oh, black women get one a little bit up. Okay. A Latino men +11, Latino women +13, bro. I would like to thank the Hispanic community for carrying the election. I would. Thank you very much. Trump support growth among certain demographics 2016 to 2024. 18 to 29-year-olds +11. The youth vote is really kind of exploding for him. 30 to 49 years old +8, 50 to 64 +5, 65 and older -2. Yeah, I thought it was weird that he was losing some support in some elderly folks. Men 18 to 49 years old +3, men 50 plus +1, women 18 to 49 years old +15. Women 50 and up +2. Postgraduates +4, college graduates +5, some college +5, high school or less +8. So he's doing better with college educated folks. A white college +5, white without college 0. I guess gains since 2020. Black college, black with college +8, without college +7, Hispanic without college +13, Hispanic without college +18. I don't know where I got 18 from. +11. Sorry. Protestants +16, white evangelicals +6, Catholic +3, white Catholic -2. Unaffiliated +4, monthly or if you go monthly or more often +6, a few times a year or less +5, Black Protestant +6, non-white Protestant +15, Latino Catholic +10. Anna brought up Turning Point. Turning Point did a good job really trying to push out the youth vote. But Turning Point, and you know what? I would people wanted to know all the time, like, how can we get more Black people to vote for Republicans and so on and so forth. A lot of people didn't want to put in all year round work. Okay. And a lot of people still don't. They'll like pay folks to do canvassing in the last second and be like, we tried. They just don't want to vote for us. You have to put in long-term work. And the thing about Turning Point USA, they didn't just canvass stuff during election time. Charlie Kirk does stuff all year. Charlie Kirk is still doing his college campus tours and talking to people. They had a vision to change the landscape. And I think they've done a good job. Was it a really big risk to to not really have their own ground game too much and put a lot into the hands of Charlie Kirk. Yes. Did it pay off? I guess obviously it did. I don't know how much of it was their strategy, was their work versus how much of it was also Kamala being a terrible candidate. I don't want to diminish what they did, but I just think there's more factors to kind of consider. I don't think going forward, like long term, that the RNC shouldn't put in a better effort to make sure that they have those kind of ground games themselves. But Charlie Kirk and them, they did a good job. They did. Born in the USA +2, immigrants +9, among immigrants, white immigrants +14, Hispanic immigrants +12, Asians +9. And that's the thread. So I'll have to look more into this and see if there's some more interesting takeaways and stuff. But yeah, Trump really did a lot of great work in making gains for a more diverse party, but so much of that is the left, the far left, cannibalizing and eating so much of the Democrat Party. The Bernie mindset is basically taken over. There's a clip I was going to show you guys, but I'll probably leave it for tomorrow. But the Zoran guy who just won in New York, like he's probably a Democratic socialist. And that's what they're embracing, and they're going to want to take that momentum into other places around the country. And if that is the new wing of the Democrat Party, I hope that the Democrat Party is about to become a very minor party and no longer a major one. And I just hope that overall, I don't know. I hope that the moderate Democrats are just the sane ones decide to fight back some more and take back their party and win in these primaries and get energized and win in these primaries. I'd rather them not be crazy. That's my thing. Some people are like salivating, like, oh yeah, I hope they just go into oblivion with this. I don't think all the Democrats are just going to kind of go away and all of them are going to cross over and convert. If anything, if too many people come into the Republican Party is just going to feel like it has to cater to all these people, and our values are going to get diluted, and eventually it's not going to matter if we win too much because we're not going to really have the core values that make us what we're supposed to be. So I want them to not be crazy, and I want us to remain pure. Like, if that means we have like harder elections, then it is what it is. But I just I don't want us to lose ourselves, and I don't want them to just go full on, Joker. Like, like it's not about the money, it's just about the chaos or whatever. Like like, let's just pour in the pile of money. Like, it doesn't matter. I don't want that to be the future of their party. I just don't. I'd rather people be normal. And it's concerning that so many people are embracing these destructive ideologies. It is. Anyway, that's the show for today. I hope I made up for being late. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content, website, articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation on the website because it does cost a stream, run the site, all the good stuff you guys can support. I very much appreciate it and appreciate you guys. You guys can check out different merch that's available, like this cool hoodie, but it is hot outside, so you guys can get the t-shirts, goat hoodie. I designed it myself. It's really cool. And you guys can check out other teas and mugs that we have available. And maybe I have to look into the Tumblr stuff. I know Tumblrs are like super popular, but yeah, go ahead and check out the mugs and different things. You guys can check out my books. There's a link in the description that'll take you to an Amazon page where you guys can check out some of my stuff. And if you like it, I encourage you guys to also leave a review as well. God bless you guys, and I will see you tomorrow.